Thank you very much. Look, I'm not under any false impressions of how people view psychedelic medicines. And I'm certainly not here to indoctrinate you through any wild epiphanies undertaken in some tent in South America. I'm not going to do that. Look, until last year, my whole career has been dedicated to big pharma and the big pharma empire. That's why I have the coat, see. So for 34 years, any anecdotal evidence of psychedelic efficacy to me was nothing more than a bunch of hippies talking about placebo effects. So I'm a scientist through and through, organic chemist, and it's to my core, but I spent the last 30 years working in commercial because I know you need to link the science with the commerce, otherwise you fail. So it's very, very important to do that. I've worked in commercial for 30 years. I got to be one of the top 200 executives at J&J, one of only 6 managing directors that actually managed all 5 Johnson & Johnson companies in one country. That was in Vietnam, so 1,000 people, I didn't speak Vietnamese, and 5 J&J companies coming in. So 120,000 employees. So it was nice to get there, but then once you get there, you wonder what else is there. And look, from a point of view of what I saw when I saw, as it was called then, Tryp Therapeutics, now Tryptamine, I saw data that I'd never, ever seen before in 30 years. And I've worked in business development, license acquisition. $100 million to $10 billion companies were purchased in that time. And I have never seen data like I've seen here. So from a point of view, and I'll show you this while I talk, because I think that way you can read all about it. Pharmaceutical medicines really live, breathe, and grow based on 4 critical elements. You've got to have safety. You've got to be safe, otherwise you're never going to get off phase 1. You've got to have a target disease population. You have to know where you want to put this product that you have, otherwise you have nothing. You've got to have efficacy. The thing has to work. If you can work better than what's out there at the moment, then that's even better. But phase 2 and 3, you work on your efficacy. The 4th is you've got to have time. Time to be able to build that product into a successful one. So you need IP, you need patent. And that way you have that runway to build that product as you want it to be. If you don't have all of these, then you have none. You might as well not even bother getting out of bed. Show me the data that a product has to clinically provide a meaningful advantage in safety and efficacy in an unmet clinical need. And it has the benefit of time through protection that you put around that product. And I'll show you the money. Please keep an open mind for the next 10 minutes. I'll show you the reason why I joined this company, and I hope that some of you will be thinking similarly when we get through this. I'll also show you why I believe that psilocybin, and more importantly, the active ingredient in psilocybin, which is psilocin, will be the most important rediscovery in neuropsychiatry for the last 50 years. And I'll show you that now. For those of you that know much about psychedelics, there are about 350 studies underway right now. 133 of those are with psilocybin itself. Now, for those that know, psilocybin comes from a psilocybe mushroom. People often will take that mushroom or they'll synthesize the same ingredient and they'll give it to you in a capsule. That tends to be what they call the gold standard of treatment. It's the best psychedelic. It's a very inward experience for those people that take it, so they don't talk much. So you don't really get much from them. But when they come out of that experience, we call a neuroplastic experience, rewiring of the brain. And when I grew up, I was told what you have in your head is all you're going to have. Never have anything else. And then I start seeing that neurons can regrow. And these things I'd never thought were possible. So from a point of view of oral psilocybin that you'll see here behind us, you need about 10 hours for that treatment to work. And that's because it's a capsule. You have to metabolize it through your liver. It then pulls out the psilocin. Psilocin goes to your brain. neuroplasticity occurs, and then over time you come out of that. Now, as a patient, I'm sure it's pretty boring. But from a clinician's perspective, dead boring. And we have feedback even from physicians who do clinical studies for 8 to 10 hours. And it's like watching the paint dry. And you've got psychiatrists and you've got psychotherapists in this country, and they see so many patients, and their time is so important that having them wait a whole day for a response for one patient is really tough. Onset of that state, to get that neuroplasticity to occur, 1 to 2 hours, more 2 plus. 1 hour is pretty much an exception. So imagine if you can give someone a treatment, and in this case, the active ingredient in psilocybin, through the best possible route of administration, which is IV infusion, over a 2-hour period. So you can keep them in that state that you need them in to undergo that change they require, and after 2 hours you stop it. So instead of 10 hours, you're looking at 2. Think about the time that is saved and the money that is saved. And think about the patient who doesn't have to wait 2 hours to even start. In 2 hours it's done. So the time is very important. Precision targeting of blood levels of psilocin itself, free psilocin. No one knows what these patients are getting. So they just don't know. So it takes such a long time. There's a 4-fold difference from those who got the least amount of treatment and those that got the most. 30% of everyone that takes a standard 25 milligram psilocybin capsule will not get anything happen to them at all. And they'll go away saying, what was all that about? That was a waste of time. 3 in 10. So you get people it doesn't work with. You get such a long period of time. You cannot reverse a capsule. You can speed up, slow down, and stop, and infusion. So the psychiatrist and the therapist have control over that process. They can decide what that patient needs. Otherwise, they don't know. They're sitting there for the ride like the patient is. They don't know what to expect. But IP positioning is really, truly important. You cannot have IP around a psilocybin capsule. Psilocybin is a naturally occurring product. You cannot patent what's in nature. So you have to make nature better, if that's possible. So if you can take away the metabolism, therefore you have a much more even distribution in every patient that you treat. You give them a pure product, so your regulatory authorities around the world won't say, what's inside that psilocybin? Well, there's about 400 different molecules inside psilocybin. What's inside that psilocin? Psilocin. USP quality. Synthesized in a laboratory. Oh, great. That's what the regulatory authorities, TGA, EMA, FDA, that's what they look for. And then they need data. I was at a presentation earlier last week with the head of the TGA. We're talking about psychedelic medicines. And it's like so many people were saying, why aren't these approved? Why aren't these approved? It's like, well, how does the TGA approve a mushroom? How can they? They need data. They're waiting for it. And I can tell you something. They're going to get it. That data, they're going to get it because we are going to deliver that data. And is it commercially scalable? Is it scalable to put someone in a room for 10 hours with 2 people all day long? $10,000 in labour alone, not to mention the cost of the product. Who's going to afford that? The government? The individual? No wonder only 19 patients have been treated in Australia in the last 1 year. Now, I'm not going to talk too much on this one. I'm going to go basically to this one right here. Much easier, right? This is 22 patients, or 22 subjects, I should say, but who knows, they're probably patients as well, that took 1 capsule of psilocybin. And this is how long it took to work, and these are the individual patient readings of psilocin in their blood. I've mentioned there's 2 points there around therapeutic zone, where we believe people get the best effect. There's a low point, which is about 10 nanograms per mil of psilocin, very, very small quantities. And there's an upper point about 30. But most people stay within a range. If you look here, you'll see 6 people that didn't even get to a range that would be considered to be effective. And if you add time bars in there as well, after 1 hour, one patient or subject started to feel something. After 2 hours, 13 or 14. Some got more than others. Some were up at the upper end. Nausea. The good thing about psilocybin in this particular case is neither addictive, but it's also safe. So non-addictive and safe, not to mention the fact that if you do go too high, you have a little traumatic experience. So keeping them within a range is an important thing to do with something like psilocybin. So imagine the opportunity that we have at Tryptamine to be the company that can deliver exactly what the patient needs over a 2-hour period. No one else can do this. And if you're looking at intellectual property protection, Tryptamine Therapeutics has IP around the use of an IV infusion for psilocin and for psilocybin. No one else in the world can use this. We have it. We also have IP around the crystalline structure of psilocin, because psilocin itself, there's a reason why psilocybin is in nature and psilocin is not. Because psilocin lasts 1 day on its own. It needs something around it to survive. So we put a crystalline salt with it, so it will be shelf stable for 5 years. We have that. We have IP around that, plus other salts that can also be used to do that, to stop other competitors coming in and trying to do what we're already doing. One thing I know, I've only got 3 minutes. I'll get through as much of this as I can, but I have a presentation. Also on our ASX website, we have this presentation in full. People want to read it, but I have 50 of them with me, so if you need one copy, I can give it to you. The other thing that's important, I'll talk about IP, because I think that is extremely important, is there are 3 conditions that we are working in. Binge eating disorder, okay? Fibromyalgia, which is pain all over the body, actually stemming from the brain. 20 years ago, doctors didn't know how to treat someone with fibromyalgia. They would say, I can't find any pain. You didn't hurt yourself. I can't find anything. And they would just send the patient away, saying it's all in your head. Now, unfortunately, they're actually correct. It is all in their head. But that pain is real. The body makes that real, because everything we have, everything we touch, if we have high sensitivity, touch a hot plate, it's not hot in that physical sense, but the brain says, don't touch that. So if you go through a trauma and you've injured yourself in a terrible way, it could be years before, your brain tries to save you from being hurt. So it says, don't do that because you're going to be in pain. So it creates that pain for you to protect you. But unfortunately, when it does that every single day for years, it's extremely traumatic. And there are no ways to treat this effectively. Antidepressants, almost everyone with fibromyalgia, antidepressant doesn't work. Pregabalin or Lyrica, it's on the PBS. You can use it for fibromyalgia, but within 1 year, 95% of people have stopped taking it because its side effect profile is disastrous. This is a disruptive technology in those areas. The third one is Irritable Bowel Syndrome. Now people say, what's about IBS? How can this possibly work in IBS? It's a psychedelic, for crying out loud. There's a huge gut-brain interaction with IBS. You have 10% of serotonin in your head and you have 90% of it in your gut. We believe that we can also stop chronic pain associated with IBS. These conditions affect 100 million people around the world. 4 million of them right here in Australia. All of them have no effective treatment. And we have IP around every one of those indications, globally. Anyone with IBS, fibromyalgia, or binge eating disorder, it's our territory. We have a $20 million valuation. We listed 8 weeks ago. You guys can do the math. This is why I joined. And before I know I get kicked off, I would like to show you one thing. Binge eating disorder. One slide only, if I can, indulge me. 6 patients, we actually had 12 we planned to do. We hoped to get a 50% response. 6 patients responded, 6 didn't. In this case, that study was stopped at 6 because we had 6 patients responding. And no matter how many binge eating disorder episodes they had, or how much they craved to eat, whether it was every day, whether it was twice a week, they all dropped 80% in terms of their desire to eat and their actual episodes themselves. All dropped the same level, all of them, and maintained that durability for almost 3 months. These people would be on 360 tablets in that time versus one treatment. In this case with psilocybin, can you imagine what happens when they have IV psilocin? That's why I joined, and that's why this is disruptive, and that's why I'm going to make you some money. Thank you.